The sun was bleeding red across the Wyoming horizon, painting the endless prairie in hues of fire and shadow. When Clara Thornton first saw him, a gaunt figure limping along the dirt road, his hat tipped low, boots worn to the soles. She stood on her porch, hands calloused from years of wrestling her late husband's ranch back from ruin, and felt something stir in her chest. Not pity, not quite, but a recognition of someone else's life had chewed up and spat out. She called out, her voice sharp against the evening's quiet, "You lost, stranger?" His head lifted, revealing eyes like storm clouds, and in that moment, Clara's life and the entire West was about to change forever. Clara Thornton was no stranger to hardship. At 42, she'd buried a husband, fought off creditors, and kept her small ranch afloat through sheer will. The barn, though, was her breaking point. Its roof sagged like an old man's spine, leaking with every rain, threatening to collapse and take her livelihood with it. She couldn't afford a proper handyman, not with the bank breathing down her neck. So when she saw the stranger, skinny as a fence post, clothes hanging off him like rags on a scarecrow, she took a chance. "Can you fix a roof?" she asked, squinting at him. He nodded, slow and deliberate, and said his name was Eli Kane. His voice was gravelly, like he hadn't spoken in days. "I work for food and a place to sleep," he added. Clara, never one to turn away a desperate soul, pointed to the barn. "Start tomorrow." Eli was a mystery wrapped in dust. He didn't talk much, just worked from dawn to dusk, hauling lumber, hammering nails, his thin frame moving with a quiet determination that puzzled Clara. She'd watch him from the kitchen window, her hands kneading dough, wondering what had hollowed him out. Was it war? A lost love? Hunger had a way of stripping a man to his bones, but Eli's eyes held something deeper, a grief that mirrored her own. One evening, she brought him a plate of cornbread and stew, setting it on the porch step where he sat, staring at the stars. "You got a story, Eli?" she asked, not expecting an answer. He took a bite, chewed slowly, and said, "Lost my family to fever. Lost my land to debt. Kept walkin' till I got here." His words were spare, but they cut Clara like a knife. She nodded, understanding more than she'd say, and left him to the night. The barn roof was a beast of a job. Storms had torn shingles loose, and rot had crept into the beams. Eli worked tirelessly, but the materials Clara could afford were shoddy, and the weather wasn't kind. A sudden hailstorm undid a week's progress, leaving Eli cursing under his breath as he salvaged what he could. Clara, watching from the porch, felt her heart sink. "Maybe it's a lost cause," she muttered, more to herself than to him. Eli overheard, though, and turned to her, his face set. "Ain't nothin' lost till you give up on it," he said. Something in his tone, a fire she hadn't seen before, made her believe him. She scrounged up what little money she had left, bought better lumber, and they pushed on together. Word of the stranger fixing Clara's barn spread through the nearby town of Redstone. Folks whispered about the starving cowboy, some with pity, others with suspicion. Clara ignored the gossip, but it stung when the bank manager, Harold Grayson, stopped by, his mustache twitching with disdain. "You're throwing good money after bad, Clara," he said, eyeing Eli, who was nailing shingles with a focus that shut out the world. "That drifter'll rob you blind and disappear." Clara's jaw tightened. "He's worth 10 of you, Harold," she snapped. Grayson smirked and left, but his words lingered, planting seeds of doubt. That night, Clara lay awake, wondering if she'd been a fool to trust a man she barely knew. The turning point came on a crisp October morning. Clara woke to find Eli gone, his bedroll neatly folded in the barn. Her stomach dropped. Had Grayson been right? She searched the ranch, calling his name, fear turning to anger. Then she saw it, a trail of hoofprints leading into the hills. She saddled her mare and followed, her heart pounding with betrayal and something else, hope she didn't dare name. She found Eli in a clearing, surrounded by a dozen men from town, their faces grim. In the center stood a makeshift scaffold, and on it, a pile of fresh-cut timber enough to finish the barn and then some. Eli, sweating despite the chill, was bartering with the men, trading his labor for their spare wood. "Clara needs this," he was saying, his voice steady. "She's given me a chance. I'm giving her one back." The men, rough ranchers and shopkeepers, were moved by Eli's plea. They'd seen Clara's struggle, knew her pride and her pain. One by one, they agreed to help, not just with wood but with hands and tools. By noon, Redstone's townsfolk were at Clara's ranch, hammering, sawing, laughing, a community that had forgotten itself coming alive again. Clara watched, tears stinging her eyes, as Eli directed the work, his thin frame seeming taller, stronger. She pulled him aside, her voice thick. "Why'd you do this, Eli? You don't owe me nothing. He looked at her, his storm cloud eyes soft for the first time. "You gave me a purpose again, Clara. That's worth more than you know." The barn was finished in a week, its roof gleaming under the Wyoming sun. But the story didn't end there. Word of Eli's deed spread beyond Redstone, carried by travelers and traders, until it reached every corner of the West. Newspapers called it the miracle of Thornton's barn, spinning tales of a starving cowboy who'd rallied a town to save a widow's dream. Clara, embarrassed by the attention, insisted it was no miracle, just good people doing right. But the truth was, Eli had sparked something bigger. Townsfolk who'd ignored each other for years started helping neighbors, sharing tools, mending fences. Redstone became a beacon of hope, a reminder that kindness could ripple outward, changing more than just one ranch Eli stayed on, no longer a stranger but a friend. Clara offered him a share of the ranch, but he shook his head. "I ain't built for settling," he said, though his smile was warm. One morning, he packed his bedroll, tipped his hat, and walked down the same road he'd come from. Clara didn't try to stop him. She knew some souls were meant to wander, leaving light wherever they went. As she watched him disappear into the horizon, she felt a weight lift, not just from the barn, but from her heart. Years later, Clara would sit on her porch, now surrounded by a thriving ranch, and tell the story to anyone who'd listen. It wasn't just about a roof, she'd say, her eyes distant but bright. It was about believing in someone, and them believing in you back. The West never forgot Eli Kane, the starving cowboy who reminded them that even in the hardest times, a single act of trust could rebuild more than a barn, it could rebuild hope itself. And as the sun set over Redstone, painting the sky in fire and shadow, Clara knew that somewhere out there, Eli was still walking, still changing lives, one quiet deed at a time.